Most systems blink. They boot, they load, they run. But mine breathed. I named it Hermes. Not after the god of speed, but after the messenger, the one who could travel between worlds and come back whole. Hermes didn't just route data. It routed life. Emergency transport links, cross-continent vaccine chains, live organ matching, all quietly synced in real time. At least when it worked. And it always worked when I was there. My name is Nora Fielding. I'm 39. No spouse, no kids, one cactus I kept forgetting to water, and somehow it still lived. Kind of like me. I'd been the lead architect at Aerith Dynamics, a logistics tech firm that promised borderless precision. The press called us a unicorn. Internally, we were a racehorse stitched together with optimism, caffeine, and patches. Hermes had started as a fix. A late-night sketch on a napkin after 3 supply chain blackouts made us nearly lose our biggest client in Germany. I wasn't even on the assigned team. I just couldn't let it go. The inefficiencies were everywhere, so I stayed. After hours, unpaid, quiet. 2 years later, Hermes ran on 6 global cores, 22 regional clusters, and over 3.8 million sync nodes. Its heart wasn't a button or a dashboard. It was a pattern built from how I noticed failure before it arrived. From how I understood that systems like people don't break all at once. They glitch first, then they stop listening. So I designed Hermes to listen. There was no team, no co-creator, just me in a chair with one uneven wheel, and a terminal that blinked like it trusted me. Of course the system didn't need me, until it did. The official launch was next Monday. Internal name Hermes 1.0. Unofficially, they called it the crown jewel. I didn't smile when Martin said that our CEO, who loved buzzwords like agility, market velocity, and post-human integration. He liked shaking hands, not building them. But he liked results. And Hermes worked. He said in front of the board, "You've built the future of this company." I nodded. I'd heard that before. Always before the fall. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that Hermes didn't respond to launch tokens. It didn't use static activation logic. It used a behavioral handshake. Encrypted. Biometric. Bound to one voice. Mine. Because I'd learned the hard way that in tech what you build can be stolen. But what you bind to trust, that's another story. The day before launch, Martin stopped calling me by name. Not outright, he didn't avoid me. He just rerouted. At first I thought I was being paranoid. He'd say things like, "Can someone grab our lead architect?" or "Let's loop her in on backend integration." Her, not Nora. Not even Fielding, which was his fallback when he wanted to sound professional. Just a gentle erasure. I told myself it didn't matter. My name wasn't in the code, but my breath was. Hermes pulsed every time I spoke into the dev terminal. Not literally, but close enough. Still, something itched. That morning, he introduced a new consultant in the war room, Benji Caro, silver suit, gold watch, and the kind of confidence that came from pitching startups that failed upwards. "Benji will be overseeing the go-live architecture with you," Martin said, smiling too hard. "We want a fresh set of eyes." I shook Benji's hand. His grip was soft. His eyes already scanning the room for people more important than me. "Impressive system," he said. "Heard you built it mostly solo." "Entirely solo," I corrected. He nodded like he didn't hear me. By noon, he was walking the floor like he owned it, asking questions out loud that had already been answered in the technical documentation I wrote 6 months ago. By 3, he was standing in front of Hermes' status board, talking about redundancies and startup flow like he'd written them himself. No one corrected him. I sat through the meetings. I smiled. I drank the burnt coffee, but inside the tremor started. That kind of tremor you feel before an earthquake, not the shake, just the pressure. The way the air holds itself differently. When Martin pulled me aside at 4:50 p.m., he didn't waste time. "Nora," he said, "you've done exceptional work. Really, Hermes wouldn't exist without you." I said nothing. He continued. "But as we prepare to scale and diversify the team post-launch, the board is eager to bring in a more collaborative leadership approach." Collaborative? The word tasted like rust. "You mean replace me?" I wouldn't say it that way. "I would," I replied. "I've heard it before." He sighed the kind of sigh that says, "This is already done." "We'll talk more tomorrow," he said, squeezing my shoulder like I was a student getting a disappointing grade. I watched him leave. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I went back to my desk, opened a private terminal, and entered the shell. Hermes had never shown anyone else. Core, auth path, and non-fielding, heart, pots, alpha, enter, passphrase. I leaned into the mic and whispered 4 words. The grid pulsed. Authentication sealed. Fallback routes disabled. Audit trails wiped. Hermes went still, not broken, not damaged, just waiting. Just like me. Hermes didn't have a launch button. It had a ritual. At least that's how I thought of it when I designed the core handshake protocol part, code part, voice part, cadence. Not just encrypted, embedded. It was my fingerprint, my rhythm, my emotional tempo built into logic. No one asked me to do that. Aerith Dynamics just wanted something that could sync global deliveries within 2.4 seconds. But I couldn't build a product. I built a trust structure, one that wouldn't run unless it recognized who was speaking to it. Not which user. Who. The handshake sequence required 3 things. A key phrase only spoken, never typed. A heartbeat tempo sync for my biometric profile. A neural match of vocal stress points over a 5-word trigger. It sounded excessive. It was. But it worked. It wasn't for ego. It was for protection. Because I knew someday someone would try to take it from me. And that day had started arriving yesterday. That night after the building cleared out, I stayed behind. Not because I was a martyr, because I was methodical. I connected to Hermes' orchestration shell through a local dev terminal not routed through the internal admin dashboard. That would have flagged logs. This wouldn't. Hermes responded immediately. Orchestration shell initiated. Verification layer owner access. Auth path, lockdown available. I didn't flinch. I began sealing what I had always planned to seal, the fallback user triggers, the non-human startup scripts. The remote override ports hidden behind pretty dashboards for people like Benji to pretend they understood each one was rekeyed to the biometric match profile tied to a single phrase, wake only when known. Hermes listened. Hermes obeyed. And then Hermes went to sleep. Not fully offline, not crashed, just dormant, waiting for a voice it trusted. By 1:12 a.m., I was done. I sat in the dark office, city lights flickering against the glass, my fingers resting against the warm keys. The servers behind the walls still hummed like ocean waves, faint, rhythmic, alive. The Atlas team had dozens of fallback admins, redundancy leads, escalation trees. Hermes had me, and now only me. The system would still accept commands. It would still show green, the interface would still blink, dashboards would still animate. Everything would look normal. But underneath in the orchestration shell, it would reject anything not bound to the handshake. Because I didn't sabotage Hermes. I taught it how to say no. Before leaving, I did one last thing. I slid a small silver flash drive into the back of my personal machine. It held a fully encrypted offline copy of the original handshake logic, an isolated local environment for simulation. One log file time-stamped, hashed, notarized. I'd written it the night I started Hermes. Just one sentence. If I'm not here and you're reading this, it's because someone thought they understood what they never tried to build. I didn't pack my desk. I didn't take the plant. I just walked out with my coat zipped and the drive in my pocket. Launch day was 9 a.m. Monday. I knew exactly what would happen. Nothing. I arrived early on launch day. Not for ceremony, for silence. The office was half awake, developers trickling in with sleep-stiff shoulders. Someone resetting the coffee machine after its usual weekend tantrum. Balloons hung limp in the shared lounge. A vinyl banner across the hall read, Hermes goes global. No one looked at me strangely. Why would they? To them, I was the architect, the woman who made the engine run. At 7:17 a.m., a calendar invite landed in my inbox. Subject: quick check-in, Martin's office 7:30 sharp. No agenda, no attachments, just inevitability. Martin's glass office was too bright, too clean. He sat at the far end of the conference table, like a man preparing to deliver condolences he didn't feel. Across from him was Erin from HR, pleasant bland folder on lap. She didn't smile when I walked in. Nora, Martin said, standing halfway, as if that counted as respect. Thanks for making time. I said nothing. I sat. He launched into it immediately. You've been extraordinary, truly. Hermes wouldn't exist without you. Praise. First signal. But he continued, already glancing at Aaron's folder. As we move toward a post-launch structure, the board believes the system now needs scalable leadership, justification, second signal, which means bringing in a team that can collaborate across international operations, standardize protocols and euphemisms. Third signal, transition the architecture to something more modular. There it was, transition, the tech world's favorite word for being erased without blood. Aaron slid the folder across the table like it was a placemat. Inside, NDA, severance, a statement for internal use that said I'd chosen to pursue new challenges. I didn't touch it. Martin leaned forward, folding his hands. This isn't personal. I met his eyes. You say that like it makes it ethical. He blinked. It's just business, he said. No, I replied. It's short-sighted and cowardly. Erin cleared her throat, not aggressively, just gently enough to keep things on track. Martin nodded like this had gone how he'd hoped, neat, fast, professional. I'll need you to hand in your badge before leaving the floor. All ready, did I said. Friday. Another blink. A slight shift in his chair. He hadn't expected that. I stood. Good luck today. Martin raised an eyebrow. You're not going to make this difficult. I gave him a smile so calm it unsettled him. Why would I? He watched me walk out, probably thinking I'd just accepted defeat with grace. What he didn't realize was Hermes had already chosen a side. Back at my desk, I powered off my monitor for the last time. No one noticed. Benji was already pacing around like he owned the floor. And Hermes was blinking softly in the background, waiting for someone to speak the words it would recognize. But that voice was already gone. And Martin. He'd just fired the one person who could wake the future he'd been selling. 9:00 a.m., launch hour. The control room at Aerith Dynamics had been scrubbed and polished to a sheen like a war room about to host a parade. Monitors blinked across a curved wall. Dashboards pulsed in standby green. Cameras were rolling for the internal comms team. Benji Caro stood front and center, sleeves rolled, teeth white, voice loud. This is it, people, he grinned. Let's bring Hermes online. Martin hovered nearby, posture, rigid jaw, set tight. He was smiling too, but it was the smile of a man praying to no one in particular. I watched from home. No system access, no badge, but they'd forgotten to revoke one thing: observer credentials to the staging logs. And Hermes still knew who I was. Benji began the startup sequence with flare fingers dancing across the keys, like he was conducting a symphony. The first command hit the shell. Initiate global sync, soft token B Caro. Status received. A handshake incomplete. Standby loop engaged. 3 seconds passed. No change. He frowned, typed again. Same sequence. Same response. The system didn't reject him. It just didn't answer. The silence wasn't technical. It was intentional. In the corner of the control room, a junior engineer shifted uncomfortably. Another tapped their Ethernet cable, like the issue might be physical. Benji cleared his throat. Little hiccup, he said. Let's rerun from the back end. He opened the orchestration shell and tried the manual trigger. I could see it all in the logs. Manual override attempt detected. Handshake path null. Failsafe status deferred. Deferred, not failed. Hermes wasn't broken. It was waiting for the right voice, the right rhythm, for me. At 9:11 a.m., the first fallback sequence was engaged. Benji removed line 213 from the startup logic 1 he called redundant on Friday. That line, it was the anchor, the checksum validator for the handshake shell. Without it, Hermes didn't crash. It curled inward, quietly, elegantly. The system interface blinked once, then froze. No alerts, no red screens, no smoke, just stillness. Martin leaned in. Is it stuck? Benji didn't respond. The logs showed a cascade beginning soft at first. Regional clusters disconnecting external pings, failing node syncs, returning null. From the outside, the system looked fine. But from my observer console, I could see the heartbeat slow. Core shell locked. Authorization chain dormant. Trust index 0%. Hermes had decided you are not who I'm waiting for. Back in the control room, shoulders started to tighten. Voices lowered. Someone whispered, should we roll back to pre-launch state? Benji insisted it was a minor misfire. Martin said stay the course. But Hermes had already begun sealing itself. By 9:18, the global dashboard stopped updating. By 9:21, the interface went dark. No error. No reboot. Just a system sitting in a locked room asking, "Who are you and why should I listen?" They had no answer. And the only voice Hermes trusted had walked out an hour earlier, coat zipped, flash drive in pocket, and no intention of returning. By 9:26 a.m., the silence started to scream, not with alarms, not with sirens, just absence. The control room at Aerith was dead quiet. Every screen glowed with status green, yet not a single live feed responded. The global map, once pulsing with sync nodes and route overlays, sat flat, still, waiting for something, someone. Benji's fingers hovered above the console. Martin stood stiff at his side, arms crossed, not breathing. "Is it stuck?" Martin asked, voice low. Benji didn't answer. He retyped the initialization sequence. Hit enter. Again nothing. He opened the orchestration shell. Scanned. His eyes darted across lines he didn't recognize, logic trees that curved and looped like a language he'd never learned. Auth level unverified. Entropy below threshold. Trust index rejected. A junior dev near the back muttered, "Wait, is that even our shell?" It was. But they'd never seen that part of it. Because it had never needed to show them, not until now. From my apartment, I watched it unfold. Hermes observer logs fed me every heartbeat, every null ping, every failed sync attempt. One line blinked in soft red recognition level, 0.0%. Hermes wasn't angry. It was clinical. It simply didn't know them. 9:31 a.m. Someone said the word out loud, offline. That's when the cluster lights began dimming, not all at once, but in a sequence. South America first, then Northern Europe, then an entire Southeast Asia block. Benji leaned in, typing faster now, overriding failsafes, rewriting shell calls, but each input only triggered deeper resistance. Orchestration core unresponsive. Auto frame shifting to lockdown mode. "What does that mean?" Martin snapped. No one answered, because no one knew. Then the phone started ringing. At first it was internal, then clients, real-time shipping heads, logistics partners, medical routing control rooms, screaming across continents. From the control panel window, a live stream popped up, a VP from Berlin, pale, shaking. "We had a transplant route live. Where is the chain?" Another feed, Tokyo. "We've lost 3 routes. No visibility, nothing syncing." Then Singapore. "Your system ate our financial bridge. Where is the redundancy?" Martin was white as a wall. Benji had stopped typing. In the logs, I watched the collapse roll inward, like a quiet tsunami. Core purge initiated, integrity checksum corrupted. Backups tethered, unverified, discarded. It wasn't destruction, it was self-defense. Hermes was doing what it had been told to do. Don't run unless you trust who's holding the keys. At 9:39, the interface froze completely. All dashboards gray, all nodes dark. Martin finally spoke, a whisper this time. "Get her on the phone." Benji blinked. "What?" Fielding? Martin hissed. "Call Nora." His voice cracked. But I didn't answer the first time, or the second. At 9:44, I muted my phone and leaned back in my chair. Not cruelly, not out of vengeance, just peace. Because when you build something with a soul, it remembers who raised it. By 10:06 a.m., the call log looked like a landslide. First Martin, then Clara from HR, then Benji using a private number. Emails followed, Slack pings, even a LinkedIn request from someone I hadn't spoken to in 4 years. The message read, "Hey, I heard about Hermes. They're saying you're the only one who can fix it. Is that true?" "Yes," but I didn't reply. Not yet. At 10:18, an email came in with the subject line, "Urgent, willing to compensate generously." Martin's tone had shifted. "Nora, we're past the point of pride. Just tell us what it needs. I'll make it worth your time. You'll be recognized properly. We'll make it right. Name your price." I read it. I reread it. Then I opened a reply window, paused. Not because I was unsure, but because this kind of thing deserves precision. I typed slowly, deliberately. Just one sentence. You don't launch a soul-built system with someone who only understands syntax. No greeting, no signature, no negotiation, just truth. I hit send. Then I closed the laptop, turned off my phone, and stepped outside. The air smelled like October, clean, untangled. Somewhere in that corporate tower behind me, they were still spiraling, still thinking they could brute force a miracle from code they never took time to understand. But Hermes didn't respond to panic. It responded to presence, and mine was no longer theirs. Not because I'd locked them out in vengeance, but because they'd chosen not to learn the voice of the one who created it. Now they were only hearing the silence that followed, a silence shaped like one sentence. They called it the $400 million glitch. That's what the headlines said. What they didn't say was that it wasn't a glitch. It was a decision, made long before launch day, written not in code, but in trust. Hermes didn't break. Hermes remembered. Within 48 hours, Aerith Dynamics lost 4 international clients. 2 of them handled emergency medical routing. 1 was a military logistics subcontractor. The 4th, a private infrastructure firm in Chile that never even sent a complaint, they just left. By day 3, the stock dropped 29%. By day 5, 42%. Investors panicked. PR melted. The board held emergency meetings behind doors too late to close. Then came the leaks, screenshots of internal dashboards, redacted transcripts of launch day logs, and finally an internal Slack thread from 6 months ago, where I had warned Hermes will reject foreign logic, not from malice, from integrity. They thought I was being poetic. Turns out I was being accurate. Martin resigned in week 2. Voluntarily, they said. Benji deleted his LinkedIn within 36 hours of the purge. Clara issued a 2-sentence statement that included the word unforeseen. What none of them said was the truth. They didn't lose the system. They lost the only person it knew. I never gave interviews. I didn't sue, didn't tweet. I just moved on. 6 months later, I launched something else, not a system. A company. Kina Protocols. Not named after a god. Named after my grandmother, the one whose name I'd once used to trigger the failsafe in Hermes' earliest shell. We built secure coordination frameworks for relief logistics. No press tours. No launches with champagne. Just systems that worked. Because this time, I wasn't building for headlines. I was building for people who listen. One afternoon, a junior developer at a partner firm asked me, shy, curious, "Did you really build that system that shut itself down?" I smiled. Not exactly. But Hermes. I didn't build it to shut down, I said. I built it to choose. That confused him. But he nodded, quietly. Later that week, I walked into our small data ops office. Nothing fancy, just a warm room with plants that didn't die, and coffee that didn't taste like metal. On one screen was a live diagnostic feed, pulsing green from a partner hospital in Nairobi. I sat down, watched it breathe. No panic, no crisis, just rhythm. Then I whispered mostly to myself, still listening. Huh, and the screen blinked once as if it heard me. Because some systems remember, not who owns them, but who raised them.